Thousands of people marched against hate in New York City this weekend following a recent wave of anti-Semitic attacks. Demonstrators took over the Brooklyn Bridge on Sunday with their message, "No hate, no fear." More than a dozen attacks against the Jewish community have been reported in New York in the last 2 weeks alone, including one during a Hanukkah celebration at a rabbi's home outside the city. 5 people were stabbed.
Anti-Semitic attacks have spread far beyond New York. A new report from the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University in San Bernardino finds hate crimes against Jewish people across the United States are up and on the rise.
Here in New York are increasing their presence in neighborhoods with large Jewish populations following a series of anti-Semitic attacks. It comes as Jewish people celebrated Hanukkah and as civil rights groups are noting an uptick in hate crimes across the country. Don Daler reports.
On December 24th, a 56-year-old Jewish man in Brooklyn was approached by a group of men, one of whom punched him in the back of the head. That same day, a 25-year-old man was attacked in the same area. He told police a group of men cursed at him, saying "effing Jew," before throwing a liquid on him. Those are just 2 of at least 8 bias attacks this week in New York, including a man struck in Manhattan and a mother in Brooklyn hit in the head while walking with her 3-year-old son.
Tonight, surrounding comments about the Holocaust made by Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib came up during an interview on a podcast. Our Steve Garagiola shows us what was said and what she's saying about the uproar.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's comments came in the context of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. At one point, she referenced the time immediately after the Holocaust.
There's a kind of a calming feeling I always tell folks when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust and the fact that it was my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, the human dignity, their existence. In many ways have been wiped out.
Critics immediately condemned her use of the word calming in any association with the Holocaust. She further said,
all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy and horrific persecution of Jews across the world at that time.
Tlaib was asked if her support of a one-state solution is inflammatory.
I'm coming from a place of love for equality and justice. I truly am. I want a safe haven for Jews. Who doesn't want to be safe?
Tlaib's office has released a statement that reads, "The Congresswoman did not in any way praise the Holocaust, nor did she say the Holocaust itself brought a calming feeling to her. In fact, she repeatedly called the Holocaust a tragedy and a horrific persecution of Jewish people." This afternoon, I spoke with Professor Howard Lupovich, Director of Judaic Studies at Wayne State, who says at the very least, one can see why her words could be taken as insensitive.
Whenever you're speaking about the Holocaust, you have to choose your words very carefully. And so she used the word calming and the word Holocaust in the same sentence or the same paragraph. And whatever her intention was, whatever she was trying to get across, those 2 words together can be hurtful, especially for people who experienced the Holocaust, for whom the Holocaust really means something devastating.
Professor Lupovich also said he thought it was an unfortunate choice to link the Holocaust with the current political situation, since there is so much emotion involved, that one should always choose words carefully.
You don't see brown shirts and swastikas, jackboots, and stiff-arm salutes on the streets much these days, but don't think for a minute there aren't people who would like to see that, and people who would like to see every Jewish person, black person, and other minority disappear from their view and from what they perceive as their white country. On the southwestern Missouri prairie, in a modest home, a man is enjoying his retirement.
Well, I'm 65 years old. I have 5 children. I spent 20 years in the United States Army. I retired as a Master Sergeant. 2 tours in Vietnam, 13 years in the Green Beret Paratroopers. I'm a patriotic white man.
Glenn Miller is also a racist.
The only thing I ain't figured out is whether to hate all you Jews or just the Zionists. That's the only thing I ain't fully figured out yet.
Miller is a well-known figure in the world of white supremacy. In the 80s, he led the White Patriots Party in North Carolina. At one point, 5,000 marched in lockstep under him. But that was a long time ago. We approached Miller now because of this. A newspaper called The Aryan Alternative. Headquartered in Missouri, Miller is the distribution manager. He led us into his home for an interview and held a sign for an extremist website up against his chest, daring us to show it.
White people are people that look white and fight white. Otherwise, they're not white. White people are dying out. Genocide is being committed against us. I admire blacks in that they are very racist. They stick together, don't they? And I hate you. You're a Jew and I hate you.
Do you advocate violence against Jews?
Advocate? What's your definition of advocate?
Tell people
I don't lose any sleep by suicide bombers in Tel Aviv, I'll tell you that much.
Those beliefs are reflected in the newspaper The Aryan Alternative.
We provide commentary, analysis of what's going on in the world, and we present a worldview from a white people's perspective.
Some of what's inside Edition 3, articles on black-on-white crime, Mexicans and health, homeschooling for whites, and trying to compare a Jewish person to a rat. Throughout, it's tinged with bigotry and racial slurs, also movie reviews and artwork, usually stereotypical cartoons and possibly copyright-infringed photos.
We started 14 months ago with 10,000 copies original edition, and we're up to 70,000.
The goal, 250,000 copies, distributed by a network of volunteers who buy them.
I think they're going to appreciate Vanguard News Network message.
And toss them into driveways nationwide.
Here we are, Anti-Defamation.
Karen Oresti is with the Anti-Defamation League.
We have a twofold mission: to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure just and equal treatment to all citizens alike.
The ADL is a leading resource on hate groups, white nationalists, and other extremists in the country.
They're on the fringe, they're in the minority, and we need to keep them there.
They do that by watching and educating.
Hate undermines communities. Hate undermines democracy. And so we look at it in a different way because its impact is that much more broad. I mean, hate kills people. I think the biggest thing that has helped them do what they are doing now is the internet.
Specifically, this website, the Vanguard News Network. Here, all types of discussions carry on, from the latest news to how to mate. The main theme running throughout, pro-white nationalism. And it comes at the expense of others: blacks, Hispanics, immigrants, the media, politicians, etc. The slogan, no Jews, just right.
We're getting more and more people to log on and to learn our viewpoints. We've also got a radio network, 24/7.
Thanks for tuning in, and either via podcast or on our live feed.
The internet has transformed the so-called white movement in this country, allowing people to remain anonymous on this site and others, to write what they wish without having to actually show themselves.
We can speak our honest minds without compromise, without censorship, and to each other and to our people. We can take our message directly to our people.
It helps get the word out about the newspaper with the goal to unite and to organize.
We're going to take back our country by whatever means necessary.
You shine the light and you let them come out in their own words, and they'll be exposed for what they really are, which is ridiculous.
We're going to change it. The white people are going to wake up. We're going to run people for office. I'm running for Congress, and I want to see 50 million white men out of work. Then Whitey will fight. He won't fight until then.
A popular bakery in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and people are lining up for luscious treats. This Jewish couple wants to put up a notice in the store's window.
We were just wondering if you would mind if we put up a flyer for a job fair at our local temple, just in the window.
Y'all are Jews?
We are, yes, we're Jewish.
No,
But it's open to all religions. And
They're in for a rude awakening.
we can't support Jews here. You know, you Jews come in. We got a Jew temple right up the street. Why don't you guys go up there?
Customers immediately take notice.
If you're trying to help people get jobs, why did you trash the whole economy in the first place? You control
I didn't
all
trash
the banks,
any economy.
We don't work at banks, or we don't own banks.
You Jews are all alike. You want to control the banks so you can get people's money.
Clearly incredulous, but so far no one does anything. What they don't know is that the clerk and the young people trying to put up a flyer are all actors working for What Would You Do? And the bakery is rigged with our hidden camera.
No, we're not going to take your Jewish agenda and put it on our window. No way.
The language is hard to listen to, incendiary, but this kind of ugly anti-Semitism is commonly heard these days.
Hi, I'm Ethan Scharf. I am a Peace Corps volunteer in Western Ukraine, in a village of about 9,000. My role in Ukraine is as a TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language teacher. I work in a team with another Ukrainian teacher, helping students from 5th to 11th grade learn English, learn about American culture, and try to make the material a little more engaging than it is just in a textbook, because learning a language theoretically through like a textbook, it's always going to be a little stilted and awkward. You don't use words that are often actually in colloquial or vernacular usage. So hopefully kind of showing them how things are actually said, helping with grammar, and making it fun.
My name's Micah Margulies, and both my parents were Jewish, and really my family on both sides is Jewish, going back really as far as I know. My grandfather on my mom's side was a cantor. My grandfather on my dad's side was a rabbi, a very prominent rabbi here in Kansas City at Congregation of Beth Shalom, and for many years. I went to a Jewish day school, Hyman Grand Hebrew Academy, starting from when I was 5 years old, all the way through high school. I graduated, went to KU. I now teach at that same school, Hyman Grand Hebrew Academy. While I was at KU, I was really involved in Hillel, the Jewish student organization. Most of my friends are Jewish. It's not necessarily that I've just always sought that out. It's not like I've been like, I'm going to try to attract Jewish friends. I think there's just something about kind of a shared understanding and shared emphasis on certain cultural qualities during like our upbringings that maybe has brought us together. In terms of like my daily life, I wouldn't say I'm a particularly religious person. I don't go to synagogue often. I don't keep a lot of Jewish commandments, but it does permeate kind of every aspect of my life. In teaching at a Jewish school, I teach English, math, and theater, so I don't teach Jewish subjects. I teach secular subjects. But Jewish values and Jewish ethics kind of goes into everything that I teach and everything that I do. So I would say it certainly plays a really prominent role in my life, culturally and relationship-wise, socially, more so than even spiritually.
Joshua Henry teaches Holocaust Studies at Raymer Beglier High School. When he started at the school, Holocaust Studies just came with the position, but now he's made a big impact at RAPAC. He said, "I don't think I was prepared for just how big of an impact teaching this class would have on me. I see the world differently now. I've always been able to have what I call a historical indifference with the subjects that I teach. Sure, bad things have always happened, but because they happened so long ago, it's easy to not get emotional about it. Studying the Holocaust is different. I've met survivors. My students have met survivors and their children. We know these people, and we relate to the victims in a way that I have never achieved in any other class that I've taught. These people could have been our neighbors, our friends, and our classmates, and that makes it impossible to be indifferent to."
So another aspect of my job is, as a Peace Corps volunteer, is to help share American culture and my own identity. So I'm Jewish, and Ukraine is actually, essentially, they call it the Pale of Settlement. It's a country that many Jews immigrated from, and historically we're from. So there are plenty of cemeteries and synagogues and buildings that were there. And as a result of changing times and less than unfortunate history of anti-Semitism around the Holocaust, lots of the graves and synagogues were destroyed. I have a friend working in a town, also in Ukraine, closer to Poland area, that was essentially it was 60 to 70% Jewish, the population, and all of the Jews were pushed out. There were mass shootings, and the town has grave sites, cemeteries that were raided, and the headstones were taken and used as materials to build the road, which is pretty awful. And there's also two mass grave sites of at least 3,000 people in each one, and very sad. But in order to help preserve the memory of that heritage, an organization started about 10 years ago, with the hopes of bringing back headstones from places around the town in the road, and restoring and helping promote the heritage of Jews within this region, because it is an important part of the history, and many people don't know because of the Holocaust and communism sort of negating the memory and idea of it. So it's important work, and I'm happy that I was able to go over there and help with the cleaning of the cemetery, cutting weeds, bringing headstones back in. As a result of community involvement, people bring headstones they find in the road to the cemetery, and we will carry it back in. And we don't want to place it in there because we don't know specifically the location, but we bring it into the cemetery to hopefully be as close to where it was as possible. In 2014, I was at the Jewish Community Center in Overland Park when I guess you could call it a neo-Nazi came and attempted to kill Jews. That area has a Jewish hospital and a Jewish elderly retirement facility, and he came with the intent of shooting Jews at least one or two of those places.
A young boy full of optimism killed. So was his grandfather. So was another woman. And this is the man accused of a murderous rampage fueled by rage and bigotry, opening fire at 2 Jewish centers in Kansas at the holy time of Passover. And tonight we are learning more about him, his violent hatred, and his victims. ABC's Steve Osunsami is on the scene.
Police say the man with the bullhorn and these volumes of videos from yesteryear is the face of hate. Today, Fraser Glenn Cross, who also goes by the last name Miller, is now 73 years old. And according to groups who've been tracking him all this time, he's a former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan and is a lifelong and raging anti-Semite.
If you were going to make a top 10 list of the vilest anti-Semites in the United States, Fraser Glenn Miller would be on it.
And we were put into a lockdown there. It was quite scary. I didn't know what was happening, and following it was a little bit of a wake-up call that America is a very tolerant and welcoming place, but there are people with some crazy views that are around, and just need to be careful and aware of that, and just being vigilant. It makes me want to be proud that I'm Jewish, but also try and educate others so that they understand that we're just people like anyone else. Like, oftentimes in Ukraine, I'm the first Jewish person anyone meets, and there are a lot of misconceptions and ideas about that, and they're like, oh, you don't look like that, or you're, just changing those opinions and exposing them to different points of view, I think, has been a good thing.
One of the things that I think is awesome about Judaism, a lot of time you might be familiar with the phrase Jewish geography. The idea is Jewish people tend to know Jewish people everywhere. And if you meet a Jewish person, there's a good chance you're like, oh, my cousin lives in New York, and so like, oh, I know that person. And somehow, even though there's not a ton of Jews throughout the world, I mean, there's a fair amount, but it's a relatively small population. And if you're involved in the Jewish community, like I am pretty significantly, when you meet a Jewish person from anywhere, there's a good chance that they know someone who knows someone. So that's very cool. The scary thing is when acts of anti-Semitism happen, there's a chance that it's impacting someone you know. And even if it doesn't impact someone you know, that's still horrible and terrifying.
Police say he came to this Jewish community center, this place of peace, on Sunday, determined to kill Jews with a shotgun and at least one pistol. He's accused of shooting dead 14-year-old Reed Underwood, a promising young singer. Reed and his 69-year-old grandfather, Dr. William Corcoran, had just pulled into the Jewish Community Center for a singing contest going on inside. Mindy Corcoran rushed to the scene to find her son and father.
As I pulled up, I saw that he was lying on the ground. And my first thought was that he'd had a heart attack. He was just lying there. But very quickly I realized that it wasn't that, and I knew that my dad was in heaven.
Police say Cross drove a mile away to this Jewish assisted living facility where they say he shot and killed Terry Lamano in the parking lot. She was there visiting her mother, which she did every Sunday. He surrendered at a nearby grade school, screaming the Nazi salute.
But obviously when I heard about the Kansas City shooting, I remember I was in a restaurant and someone texted me on my phone. My phone started going off with these texts about people saying did you hear what happened? And I mean, I was terrified. Like I said, it's horrible, even though I don't know the two people who were killed. They ended up not being Jewish. That's beside the point. It's horrible, but there was also a chance that was one of my students or one of my friends or one of my family members, all of whom are at the JCC every single day. Same when I heard that someone got shot at Village Shalom. That could have been a family member or someone I know at Village Shalom. In Pittsburgh, my sister lives in Pittsburgh, and she lives in a very Jewish community, and she's married and she has 4 kids, and I heard there was a shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue. I started freaking out immediately. I mean, there's not that many synagogues in that area. My sister is very observant. She goes to synagogue, or if not her specifically, her family goes to synagogue every single week. That terrified me. My first thought, there was no information yet about it. I got a text alert on my phone when it happened. CNN text alert said shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Been about 2 years ago. Residents here and other places where he's lived over the years pretty much all report the same thing, that he was unusually quiet, that he kept to himself, didn't mix it up with them very much, and that they are all stunned that he has been charged for these horrific murders. This morning, investigators are uncovering the motives of a killer. Alleged synagogue shooter Robert Bowers is not believed to have a prior criminal history, but social media posts attributed to him contain anti-Semitic views and other hate speech, and a final entry just before the shooting perhaps was an indicator of the deadly violence about to unfold. On the social networking site Gab, Bowers' profile page read, quote, "Screw your optics, I'm going in." The suspect repeatedly posted photos of guns, including these 3 handguns. It's unclear if they are the same 3 guns authorities say Bowers used to carry out the attack, along with an assault rifle. The 46-year-old lived at this apartment complex, which officials evacuated before checking the area for explosives.
We could hear the shots, and we were standing in our living room, and we could just hear just rapid fire.
Online posts attributed to Bowers also revealed the suspect is not a supporter of the president, describing Mr. Trump as a globalist, not a nationalist, a word the president called himself recently. Local media reports say Bowers was raised by his mother, then grandparents when she died. Former neighbors saying he was thoughtful to call them if they left their garage door up. But authorities say responding police officers encountered a far different man.
That was one of the scariest 30 minutes of my life until it emerged what synagogue it was at, and I learned that it wasn't one that she goes to. It's still horrible. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from what had happened, but I mean, the point is, it didn't just impact me generally, it really had an impact on me specifically. And again, what it's done is it's raised my awareness of how much, even though in my day-to-day basis here, living in Overland Park, I don't feel threatened. I feel very confident I could wear a kippah on my head, walk around town, not have any problems. that doesn't mean that anti-Semitism is not a very real issue facing people every day in the United States. It might seem, we feel comfortable. Most of us here probably feel like anti-Semitism is more rooted in the past. But even though it certainly might have been worse in the past, there is still a lot of it around, and we need to be mindful of that. And it's not like it's my or Jewish people's responsibility to eradicate anti-Semitism. Sometimes people will say things like, oh, you just educate people and they won't be anti-Semitic. It's not my job to say to a person, here's why you shouldn't be anti-Semitic. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility to show people the truth about Judaism and who Jewish people are, and that it is not a group of people, like no group of people should be, to be stigmatized and demonized for their beliefs.
So I haven't directly seen a lot of anti-Semitism, but you will come across swastikas and some negative things painted around towns, villages, some cities around Ukraine. I think you would also see some of those around America and other European countries. I think the real issue comes back to ignorance and lack of education about that. If you've been told a group of people is like evil or bad, and you don't get a lot of opportunities to see them, or if you only see them as tourists or people coming through with money, you may just contribute to those negative ideas, and it's not good. But for me personally, I haven't seen a lot of anti-Semitism. I've seen misunderstandings where maybe a kid will pick up something like a cone and put it on their head, and they'll say, oh, look at me, I'm Jewish, and I try and explain things about that's not good. It also comes back to cultural differences. They don't have exposure to different cultures, races like we do in America, at least as much. So there is a lot of ignorance in that, and it's hard to enforce that. But I think anti-Semitism is definitely something everyone should take a stance against. So I just try to educate as I can, not force it down kids' throats, but help show that Jews were there, they were a part of Ukraine and the history in Europe, and that you should respect that.
To prevent future genocides, proposed legislation heading to the U.S. House of Representatives aims to make the Holocaust part of education in schools across the country. It isn't right now. The 19's Courtney Friedman tells us about the Never Again Education Act and why advocates and legislators on both sides believe it's so important.
6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust, a traumatic part of history. Yet right now, there are only 8 states in the country where it's mandatory for schools to include the Holocaust in the curriculum.
Unfortunately, there's still a number of deniers out there about the Holocaust.
Debbie Link is the education director for Hadassah, an international women's Zionist volunteer organization. The thought of people saying the Holocaust never happened keeps her up at night.
What you don't remember, you're doomed to repeat. And that's what we have to do with history. We need to know about the Holocaust. There's still genocide happening around the world.
That's why Hadassah and bipartisan legislators came up with the Never Again Education Act, meant to pull in donations, not tax dollars, to fund Holocaust education in every state.
Too many teachers do not have the resources to provide that type of teachings.
The act could fund transportation to Holocaust museums or books about the Holocaust.
It also will give the opportunity for survivors who are still with us to go into a classroom and meet with students.
These are some Holocaust survivors that are actually here in San Antonio, and that's very special. It's been more than 70 years since World War II ended, and there are very few survivors left, so it's important that we keep their stories alive.
In 2019, Oregon has become the 11th state to require Holocaust studies in their educational programs. Other states that require it to be taught in schools are California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. Joshua Henry agrees with this saying, "I think every school should have a class like this." Many students have some knowledge of the Holocaust coming into the class, but I think for many, this is a completely eye-opening experience that will stay with them forever.
One of the books that I teach in 8th grade every year is Night by Elie Wiesel. And one of the focuses that we talk about as we read it is we want to understand the Holocaust, obviously, and Elie Wiesel's experience with the Holocaust and the factors that led the Holocaust to happen. But I also want students to understand the role of anti-Semitism in the world today. So I assign a project every year in conjunction with our reading of Night. They have to interview 2 Jewish people in the community, and only one of them can be a family member and one has to be a non-family member, because I'm encouraging them to kind of go out into the community. And they have to be Jewish who they're interviewing, and the project is intentionally open-ended, but they are talking to people about anti-Semitism, their experience with anti-Semitism, education, and kind of the role of Judaism in their lives. So my hope with the project is it broadens students' understanding of what different people in their lives, Jews who they might know well or some who they know kind of well, what their experience has been. Luckily, I think the younger students, 8th graders, a lot of them don't have a lot of experience with anti-Semitism. I don't have a lot of personal experiences with anti-Semitism in terms of feeling discriminated against or threatened because I'm Jewish. That does not mean that I don't think anti-Semitism is a very real threat.
When asked about the course content for his Holocaust Studies class, he said, "We typically use quite a few strategies when approaching this class. We do a lot of document analysis and try to put things into context of what was going on in the world at various stages of the Holocaust, both before and during the war. We dive pretty deep into individual stories and experiences of people involved in the Holocaust. We even have a second-generation Holocaust survivor come and address our students."
The Jewish culture in Ukraine, it's hard to say. In a lot of areas, it is kind of lacking because Jews either were killed, fled during the Holocaust, or have since immigrated as the Iron Curtain fell at the end of the Cold War, or in the early 1990s. So they immigrated to Israel, America, or other European countries to get away from the collapsing Soviet regime. And yeah, there is some Jewish life, but it's for the most part run by Chabad, the more religious and like ultra-Orthodox sect of Judaism. So which can be good. They practice things from the Torah, the Bible, very strictly, so they uphold certain things, but I think that can be a little intimidating for people who are Jewish and may have lost some of their identity living in communist Ukraine, where religion was sort of suppressed and they don't know much about their history, so seeing that intensity might be a little overwhelming. So I think if there's more like less intense Judaism, I think that would be good. It's good that there's something. There are plenty of cities like Odessa, Lviv or Lvov, Uman, that are centers of Jewish communities. They have Jewish community centers of their own, thriving synagogues, and people that are active and supporting the community. But I think more could be done to make people aware that Jews are just people and nothing to be afraid of or to hate against. I think the fact that the president now has Jewish heritage and another high up politician, I'm not sure if it's the prime minister, but someone high also within the government is Jewish. I think that helps somewhat with public opinion that the country is doing better, the leadership has Jewish heritage, and they're not something that they're not evil or something that is harmful. So it's, yeah, there is Judaism in there. It's different than in America, but I'm glad that there's something there.
I mean, when all schools in the country certainly are taking more precautions than in the past about shootings in schools, because unfortunately we live in a current climate where school shootings are very, very common. So school security has always been something that our schools takes very seriously. Since the shooting, because again that happened in our building, we have completely revamped our security system. Over there was a box called Safe Defend. And basically what it is it's a system that all of our teachers' thumbprints are in, and if I put my thumbprint on there, it will lock down the school. And it will contact the Overland Park Police Department automatically and tell them that in room 204, the room that we're in, there has been a lockdown initiated, okay? This is not a cheap system. This is not a system that you put in if you don't think that it's really important to ensure the safety and security. There is a person whose job at the JCC is overseeing security in the Jewish community. That is their job. Not just here, they work with synagogues, they work with the school, they work with the Jewish Community Center to ensure safety and security. So it is certainly something that we take very, very seriously here. We have lockdown drills. I know a lot of schools have lockdown drills, but it's something that we talk about. And we talk to the students. I'm not sure, you know, with this is a K through 12 school. I work with the middle and upper school students. And, but especially with the middle and upper school students, we're open with it. You know, we have dialogues. We had, we talked very openly about the shooting that happened here at the JCC for a long time afterwards, so that students could process their understanding of it, ask their questions, and deal with what's really a very traumatic event, even if, you know, it wasn't them being shot at, or they might have been on break because it happened over spring break. It still is a traumatic event to know that that is so near in your proximity. So yes, it's something we take very seriously.
Anti-Semitism is a big problem in the world, but when it comes to teaching it in schools, it can cause even more controversy. When asked about it, Joshua Henry talks about backlash from parents. Occasionally, I have a parent question some of the content that comes with a class like this, but when I explain why we are covering a particular topic, they usually understand. Almost all of the feedback from parents, students, community members, and other teachers have been positive. His thoughts on what students take away from the class are pretty positive, quoting, "For the most part, I feel pretty positively. Whether you took this class because you were really into the Holocaust or because it just worked out best for your schedule, I hope that my kids walk away with a better understanding of the subject and a better understanding of the world around us."
Could the Holocaust happen again? I'd like to think that it won't, that people have learned that you can't allow atrocities like that to happen. You can't demonize groups of people and allow that to happen. Could there be something at a smaller scale? Possibly. There is still hatred and misunderstanding in the world. I think we're developing throughout the world where we're more tolerant, which is a good thing. I think part of that is travel technology has allowed us to see other cultures and ideas more and understand that there are more similarities and differences. While we might have certain opinions that are different based on the culture, we all still have certain beliefs about the rights of humans and respect that I think everyone can agree to. So I think that won't happen again.
When I asked Joshua Henry if he believed something like the Holocaust would happen again, he said, "I absolutely believe that genocide can happen again, and it is happening currently in several parts of the world."
Our thoughts turn to the grieving families in New Jersey. Yesterday, 2 wicked murderers opened fire at a kosher supermarket and killed 4 innocent souls, including a brave police officer who faced down the shooter and very bravely faced the shooter down. With one heart, America weeps for the lives lost. With one voice, we vow to crush the monstrous evil of anti-Semitism whenever and wherever it appears. And we're working very hard on that. And I can tell you that we have a lot of people in government working very, very hard on that. But today we're taking another historic action. In just a few moments, I'll sign an executive order to combat anti-Semitism. This action makes clear that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits the federal funding of universities and other institutions that engage in discrimination, applies to institutions that traffic in anti-Semitic hate. So this is a very powerful document that we're signing.